You can always make a better meat sauce with better meat. Today, we do the opposite. Supermarket mince, simple ingredients, relying on timing, browning, fat control to push them far. This is my ultimate Bolognese 2.0. We start with the fat. Traditionally, unsmoked, non-spiced pancetta, salt-cured pork belly. For the supermarket, unsweetened, unsmoked bacon. Whatever the shopping permits, what we want from it is a neutral, silky pork fat base with the added benefit of some collagen and some concentrated savoury pork depth. We slice into chunky lardons. Cold pan, we very slowly render the fat. It can take 15 to 20 minutes. The fat has mostly melted. The lean parts are partially confit, staying soft. They come out while we deal with the meat. So what do we want from the meat? Flavor and texture. Sounds simple, and it was in Bologna in the 80s because the choice of cut was outside skirt, the diaphragm of the beef. Extremely beefy with loose grains. Boil and shred and you'd be okay. That's why most classic recipes call for the beef to be added after the vegetables. They had flavor, they were solving for texture. With mince, no one wants a boiled mince soup. We solve for flavor by browning it. To do so without sacrificing texture, we need to prevent our mince from weeping, releasing excess moisture into our pan, boiling everything. We enlist the fridge to dry the surface. 80% onto a large plate, leaving 20% untouched. You'll see why. We spread it into a thin layer. We pre-cut it so we don't over-agitate the pan later. Into the fridge uncovered, minimum 1, no more than 2 hours. Now we have a dry side and a less dry side. Because we want the dry side to hit the really hot pan, we flip this with the help of our parchment paper. Hot pan keeping just a thin layer of the rendered bacon fat, the stingiest amount of mince goes into sear. Single-sided searing, we're not flipping, so the surface of the dry side that is in contact with the hot metal gets to develop maximum meaty flavor via the Maillard reaction, while the majority is protected by the moisture from the top side, almost staying medium rare. This way, we develop flavor without sacrificing texture, and we're not touching anything to minimize heat loss. Once you can see the golden brown edge, quick release, everything out. What do we have here? The sticky bit, the fond, concentrated meaty goodness, the key to any pan sauce. And in essence, we are batch cooking a pan sauce, so let's paint over it. Round 2. The only rule is that you have to always add enough to cover the fond, because a naked fond is a burned fond. Always bring it back to temperature before the next batch. Now, we have some browning here and a ton of browning here. We need moisture to mop it up. 20% controlled weeping goes in. 0 dilution. Everything we didn't want to do in the previous round, we want to do now. Agitate, move, scrape. One clean bottom with a thin layer of fat, we begin to build out sauce. Just because the sofrito of carrot, celery, onion go well together, it doesn't mean they have to go in together. In our case, at this stage, just the onion, minced. What do we want from it? Like in most stews, it forms our savoury base and contributes some subtle sweetness. The pectin and fibre will give us body. The oniony taste, which is heat sensitive, will be completely gone after long cooking. What more can we get from it? By adding it alone, the ability to isolate its natural sugars. Once we've evaporated most of the water content, concentrating the flavors we just talked about, we go past boiling point, gradually developing roasted, nutty complexity thanks to caramelization. And without the carrot and the celery in particular, we can afford to go really, really far. Now, once this is deeply golden and before it develops any bitter taste, lowest possible heat or even stove off, mince back in, meat juices back in, and before we add our lardons, we mince them as finely as possible so they dissolve into our sauce. Had we done this early, they'll become crispy instead. Herbs were not often used in older recipes and still not permitted by the Italian Academy of Cuisine, I assume, to keep this a meat-forward sauce. We deviate slightly by adding 1 bay leaf early on for some background herbal structure and subtle bitterness to balance the sweetness and the fat. Now, we've not salted anything, partly because the bacon is salty, but mostly because I want to save the salt quota for our umami bomb. The supermarket candidates: soy sauce, fish sauce, salted anchovies, parmesan, dried mushrooms. Purely in terms of umami per unit, this is not even a competition. The fish sauce wins. In terms of flavor neutrality in the context of a long braise, shockingly, the fish sauce is the most neutral. The pungent marine funk is extremely heat sensitive. That's why in Thai curries, it's often added last. We max out our salt quota while still staying on the safe side. 0.6% salt of the combined weight of the bacon and mince, which works out to about 3% fish sauce in the spirit of Colatura di Alici. We top up with water. But we're not done yet. Milk is often used in traditional recipes to add richness. Knowing we'll be dressing our pasta with grated parmesan, we take a page from minestrone by adding the parmesan-rind. Milk 2.0. This will slowly release more umami and salt and bring a lot of body to the liquid. What more can we do? We've added as much umami per unit as possible. We've done our best to make the meat's natural umami more noticeable. There's only one missing piece that would multiply everything. Featured in the first recipe using the term Ragù Bolognese as something that would make the sauce even tastier. Dried mushrooms. We only need a few. About 1% of the weight of the mince. Now we can finally cook, but not on the stove. 150 oven uncovered for the surface fat to gently fry everything, developing more complex flavors. 2 hours, stirring every 20 minutes, topping up as needed. After 2 hours and fishing out the bay leaf, mushrooms and grilled cheese, I took the optional step of leaving it in the fridge overnight to make fat skimming easier, but more so to demonstrate with everyday mince and breakfast bacon, you can still get to this bone broth jelly consistency. Now, while umami dissolves in water, aroma lives in fat. Let's season our fat. As much or as little as you like, with the whole dish in mind. We bring in some heat slowly to avoid splashing from the accidentally skimmed liquid. Grated carrot in. The majority of a carrot's flavor and 100% of its color are fat soluble. By cooking it after fat skimming, we're keeping maximum flavor and color. Of course, we also evaporate the water content, concentrating its water-soluble sweetness. Once this is lightly golden, minced celery goes in to impart some savory depth, some minerality, and a bit of fiber. We're adding it slightly later to not flood the carrot with moisture. Now, crushed garlic, which is not used in Bologna, goes in. This will impart a lot of savory depth and a bit more sweetness. The pungency, which is extremely heat sensitive, will be completely gone by the time we finish. Time for another umami bomb that is not coupled with salt, tomato puree. This will also bring a bit of acidity and a bit of sweetness. Just a touch more fat to absorb the beautiful flavors. Now white wine, which tends to have high acidity, goes in to brighten our dish. It also carries a much lower risk of excess tannin, which would bring bitterness. If you want to use red, make sure it's light red. We boil to drive off the majority of ethanol smell before we dilute. Now, umami jelly back in. Bring this back to a bare simmer. We taste now to adjust the fish sauce as we still have time to cook off the marine funk. Once you're happy, lid on, 1 hour. Look at that. We once again skim and reserve all the fat. Now, cream is sometimes used in older recipes for richness and body. Today, we take a page from 1.0. We take a few ladles. We blitz. We have our meat cream. Now, to cook the pasta, no need to rinse your first pan. We add a generous amount of yummy fat. Dry, short pasta, straight in. We treat this like a risotto. First, we coat the pasta with our yummy fat, modulating surface starch release, developing a tiny bit more nutty flavor. We then introduce our sauce. If pasta must absorb liquid to cook, let this be the liquid. For salt control, we top up with boiling water, just enough to cover everything. We keep stirring, gradually releasing surface starch, thickening the sauce without cream. Once the pasta's done, this is the consistency you can expect. I like to keep it on the wet side as the sauce would continue to thicken as it cools. Stove off, we add our meat cream. Last umami bomb, we shave a generous amount of parmesan cheese. One more round of reserved yummy fat. You see how it thickened just after a few minutes? This is the consistency you can expect. We started the process merely asking questions from our ingredients. What do we want from it? How do we get the most out of it? We now have a savory liquid, vibrant fat, combined and thickened by the pasta itself, all from the supermarket. There's no shopping to stop you. Cook it. This is Bolognese 2.0, and this one's for Helen Rennie. What a dish! Look at the consistency.